todos, bienvenidos a este siguiente meetup sobre producto en The Hero Camp. Una breve introducción de Hero Camp antes de presentar a Todd. The Hero Camp, muy breve, es una escuela de Product Managers para Product Managers. Estamos con un curso en Madrid y otro en Barcelona. La verdad es que lo estamos petando, no es porque lo digamos nosotros. Cada vez más gente que son Product Managers. Y no solo eso, sino cada vez más gente que después de hacer el curso está saltando a unos puestos que realmente cuando empezamos hace 3 años con el primer curso ni nos lo hubiéramos imaginado. Parte de lo que hacemos, más allá de diseñar y hacer cursos de Digital Product Manager, es también difundir, queremos divulgar todo lo que es cómo se hace producto, cómo se piensa en producto, y por eso todos estos meetups también. Y hoy tengo que decir que estoy súper feliz de tenerte, Todd, con nosotros, otra vez, tengo que decirlo.
Sí, la primera charla.
La primera charla, porque el primer curso que montamos todavía no nos llamábamos The Hero Camp, pero esto era el 10 de marzo de 2017, un viernes, en la primera clase. Todd, tuvimos la suerte de tenerle ya en el primer día y dio su primera charla. Tú fuiste el primer profesor de The Hero Camp.
¡Ay, wow! No sabía. ¡Qué bien! ¡Qué honor!
Así que, verdad, muy felices de tenerte otra vez con nosotros. Un lujo para nosotros tener a una persona como tú hoy aquí.
No, es un placer.
Okay, so this is like our brief introduction about what is the Hero Camp.
Okay, it's cool.
What about you, Todd? I mean, who are you? There's a lot of people there. Who are you, Todd, and what do you think you are here today talking about product roadmaps?
Yeah. Who am I? So, Todd Lombardo, I am mostly a mutt, meaning I have studied design, I have studied business, I have been in product, I have been an engineer, I have been a scientist. So I'm a little bit of everything. But what does that mean? That means actually I'm a pretty good product manager because product managers have to take in information from everywhere and synthesize it. So right now, I am the VP of product at a startup in Boston, Massachusetts, in the United States called MachineMetrics. What we are is we're an industrial IoT solution for manufacturing. We create software for manufacturers. So kind of like Google Analytics gets data from a web page and presents it to you in an analytic form. We do the same thing, but for machines on a factory floor. So we pull the data off, do some analytics on it, help those people on the factory floor to make better decisions, smarter decisions on how to make that factory better.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Yeah. Why am I here? I kind of wrote a book that some people know about.
Yeah. What is the book?
Yeah.
We have a book.
So yeah. So I'll tell you the story of this. It started a few years ago, quite a few years ago now, where 2 colleagues of mine, Michael Connors and Evan Ryan, we were working together in a company called Fresh Till Soil, and we were doing road mapping workshops for our clients. That they were asking us, hey, help us out with product roadmaps. We struggle with product roadmaps. So Evan and I had a product background, and it was a consulting agency. We said, sure. We rolled up our sleeves, created this workshop for product roadmaps, and we noticed that more and more people wanted it. And then we started offering it to the public. And then more and more people want it. And we said, okay, well, this is interesting. There's got to be a book on this. Are we doing this right? You know, we should look up to see who else has written about this. And it turns out there was no one book about road mapping. And there was chapters, there was little sections, but there wasn't one book about it. So we said, well, if not us, then who? If not now, then when? So we decided to roll up our sleeves and try to write or codify our workshop into this book.
Yeah. And Todd is the kind of person that if he says, I want to write a book, he finally do it, yeah? And it's here. It's not your first book, so no. He has another one on spring design. Really, really interesting. This is the second one. And you already have a third one.
Yeah. It's called Product Research Rules. One of the things about product managers is we hear a lot about design research and UX research. We also know that as product managers, we need to understand the market. So we need to understand market research. But also, in addition, as product managers, we need to understand our product analytics and data science. So Product Research Rules tries to combine those 3 things together in a set of rules that can help you as a product manager guide your actions around market experimentation, analytics, and user research.
Wow, nice,
yeah.
Nice.
So,
but our focus today is road mapping. Yeah, so let's go for that.
Bueno,
yeah. Vamos a por ello. So my first question would be around, I mean, I have been product manager since many years ago. So I have seen a lot of people working on products and of course working on roadmaps. But I don't know if you have like the same opinion, but sometimes I think that the tool itself is not as useful as it can be. Yeah. So do you think that it's like, what kind of problems do you think that people are facing around roadmaps?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's one that I hear a lot about, and we write about it a lot in the book, and that people would find that, well, the thing about the roadmap, it's like anything, it's a tool. Just like any tool, it can be used well, or it can be used poorly. You can use a hammer to not just hammer in a nail, you can use a hammer to make holes in a wall. One might be better at that than the other. And so what we hear about product roadmaps is that people are conflating their roadmap and their release plan. It's probably one of the #1 things, is they think their roadmap should be their release plan. Or they try to jam the two of them into one document. So that's one of the biggest problems we see. A lot of people will see a problem that their roadmap becomes what's like Groundhog Day, that movie where the person, Bill Murray, wakes up every day and repeats the same day all over and over again. And it's like, well, our roadmap hasn't changed at all. And then there's the complete opposite of that, where the roadmap changes daily or weekly based on the CEO's whim or the CPO's whim, or the customer said, oh, I want feature XYZ, and so the product team just goes, okay, throw out the roadmap, build XYZ, the customer said so. And when that happens, you don't have that steady vision, that steady hand. The thing is, we need to be agile, right? So if you do it the other way, where you're too rigid, you're saying, all right, I'm going to make this Gantt chart of a release plan that goes out 18 months and has all these different swim lanes. Like, that's another thing, it's too detailed. A roadmap shouldn't be overly detailed. Your release plan needs to have the right details of what features, who you're serving, why, what's the time span of those feature releases, but your roadmap's much more strategic. It's much more forward-looking and strategic than it is about the tactical execution. That's really the release plan. But they need to come together. So we can talk about that a little bit later.
We will talk about that later, but this is really most important thing. And perhaps after that, I would like to ask you, so what for a roadmap? So what is useful for? I mean, I'm a product manager. Why should I use a roadmap?
That's a great question. You were telling me earlier about some work today with one of your clients. What was that client asking you for?
They were asking like to think what next, So it's what should I do in the next months, year,
right? Yeah. And they were also asking you about how do you shorten that time span for getting your team aligned, right?
Absolutely. Right? One of the main struggles they have mentioned me before 2 hours ago. They were saying it takes me a lot of time to align all the stakeholders. It could be there is some kind of tool or something that I can use to reduce that time.
Right.
We know it's important to align everyone, especially in big corporates. Like, but it's how can I reduce the time doing that? How can I start the project aligned with the main stakeholders?
Yep. So alignment. So why do we have a roadmap? Alignment. Give ourselves, our product teams, a sense of direction where we're going. Right. So think about that metaphor of a roadmap. You're here. You're looking at a roadmap, and I want to go to, let's say we're in Madrid. I want to go to Barcelona. There's a way to get there. We can go from Madrid to Barcelona in a number of ways, right? The destination, the objective, the outcome is we end up in Barcelona. But we could take a train. We could take the AVE, it's a different kind of train. We could take Iberia. We could take Vueling, so we could go fly first class in Iberia. We could fly cheap class on Vueling, Ryanair, EasyJet, or we could walk. It would take us a long time. We could ride a bicycle, one of my favorites. There's a lot of ways we can get there. Now, if we get on a plane, can we like stop somewhere in the middle and get off and say, oh, we changed direction, we gotta stop? It's really hard to do that when you're on a plane. It's like you're gonna convince the pilot to stop midway. No, you gotta go all the way. So sometimes when you make a commitment, you might have to go a certain distance before you can stop and shift direction, right? So that's another thing about a roadmap can say, hey, if we're going to commit to doing this, let's say, for example, the product I'm in right now, we are converting to a time series database. We have time series data coming off these machines. We did not have a time series database. At the time the company started, they didn't have, that wasn't existing, or it existed, but it wasn't in good shape. Now, time series databases are really robust. So we have to move all this technology, all our data into a time series database. For us to do that, it's not going to be a 1 month effort. It's going to be like a 6 to 8 month effort. So we had to carve that out and say, all right, we're committing to this. We know that we're going to have some part of that team doing that. We know those features aren't going to be released till later, but it's on our roadmap, and we got to carve out that strategy. And so that the team knows that this is where we're going, because we're going to have this technology. We couldn't like do it. Yeah, sure, we could do it halfway and then stop, do something else, but boy, that would be a wasted effort. So the other thing about roadmaps is you want to try to reduce the amount of wasted effort. I can't tell you how many times, I mean, raise your hand if you're a product manager and you shipped a feature or product that nobody cares about. I've done it. We've all done it. Everyone does that. It's okay, but we want to reduce that. And a roadmap can help us with that, because it puts out customer-facing problems that we can solve. If you ship a feature and it doesn't solve the problem, well, okay, you still need to solve that problem. Don't just, you got to fix the feature. So
it's a tool for aligning. It seems that it also is very useful for communicating what are we doing, but how also are we doing it, solving problems.
Which customer problems are we going after?
But it seems also that it's like kind of, I mean, what is the relation between roadmap and the strategy? Because I mean, the strategy could be like, okay, I want to go to Barcelona, but the strategy could define some, restrictions.
How you're going to go there, right? Like we're going to go to Barcelona, but we're going to go there by train, right? And so that's like, if I think about that metaphor, the strategy kind of help you, how are you going to go there? And then if we think about an example, so in a large company like Google, they have a lot of products. They have Gmail, they have Chrome, they have Android, YouTube. Those are all different products. They all roll up to Google's mission, which is organize the world's information. But Gmail's is like, organize your inbox. There's a strategic relationship there, cool. YouTube is like, organize the world's videos. And so you probably think one for Chrome and one for Android too that I mentioned, but each of those have their own set of strategies. And those strategies need to have some kind of goals, right? What are you trying to do? Okay, we want to go here, but what's our goal to get there? Where are we going with this product? Is Gmail going to have this, what kind of business outcomes do you want to have? So Gmail obviously reads a lot of your email and then sorts it for you into these different buckets and categories. That makes it easier for you to navigate your email because they have those machine learning algorithms in it. That's great. That's the strategy that separates them from, say, like if you go with Fastmail, which is also an email service. You can pay for it as well, but doesn't necessarily have that same kind of thing. Right? So they've made a choice what to do with that. And they probably, I'm not inside Google, but they probably have goals, right? Establishing those goals is really important to make sure that what you're working on in your roadmap lines up to your company vision, your company mission, your strategy.
So you mean that you have to check every time that what is in the roadmap is aligned again with the strategy, because if not, you are like following some other direction that perhaps is not the strategy of the company, even the strategy of the product.
And your roadmap will change. It's a little bit like a bank account. You don't want it to change necessarily daily, like it will fluctuate, right? Your bank account never stays the same balance over and over because you get paid every so often, you have expenses, but you want to kind of keep roughly some stable window there, right? And depending on the size of your company, the size of your product, the stage of life cycle you're at, that may change a little bit. So yeah, I update, and I'm at a 60-person startup. I update my roadmap probably once every other month, and my release plan obviously updates with that too. So but I've also seen teams that they update their roadmap every quarter, or every 6 months. Rarely do I see teams only update it once a year. Typically what I see in companies, the larger companies, even smaller ones, they'll have annual goals, annual objectives. They could be OKRs. Once they've set that annual goal, they will then, okay, let's go backwards and say, this is what we want to happen by December. what happens in Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4, what are our goals along the way? And maybe we, you know, the ones at the end might be a little fuzzy, the ones in the beginning are more crystal clear. And you make sure that your roadmap aligns to that, because there's 5 parts of a roadmap.
Well,
we'll talk about that.
Yeah.
Next, right? What's a roadmap?
Yeah. So what is, so
we've been talking about this. What the heck is it?
What is a roadmap?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when we looked at a lot of roadmaps along the way in writing this book, and we had a couple companies send us like dozens of them that we worked with. So it's really interesting to see that you can put a roadmap. A lot of people think like, oh, is it a Trello board? Is it an Excel spreadsheet? Is it a PowerPoint? Is it a this or that? And there's also lots of tools for roadmaps like ProdPad, RoadMonk, Product Board. There's so many of them out there now. There's a lot of SaaS products out there. They all have their pros and cons. They're all great in some way. They all started because they're trying to solve a good problem. But when you boiled it down, when you took out the format, you took out the you know, what it was in, it turns out there's really 5 core components to a roadmap. Just 5 things. You have these 5 things, you have a roadmap. You have to have some kind of product vision. So you might have a company vision, right? But what's the product vision? Now, if you're a small company like we're at, your product vision and company vision, they're the same thing. But if you're Google, your product vision for Gmail and your company vision for Google are probably 2 different things, because Google is actually owned by Alphabet, which has a different vision, right? They should align, but you got to have a product vision. Even if it's just a simple little, like, you know, sentence, because it reminds everybody, why are we doing this? What are we aspiring to? When you have that, okay, what are your objectives? What are your goals? We call them business objectives, but they could be some kind of OKR, some kind of goals, some kind of driver that you're using. Like, all right, we want to increase customer engagement. We want to decrease churn. We want to increase revenue. Like, there's all sorts of objectives there. In the book, Bruce McCarthy, my colleague, co-author, he did a lot of research and boiled down every OKR objective and goal that he came across. And Bruce is like, to us, he was like the wise elder of the 4 authors. And Bruce was talking about roadmaps in the Boston area since like 2002. So when Evan and I started talking about this, I said, we have to bring in Bruce. We have to bring in Bruce to this because he's been doing this for so long. So Bruce had this research on, there's basically 10 universal business. Every company goal you have could fit into one of these 10 buckets, right? And so you have to have some goal. And of course, it's going to be unique to your business. But if you think about it, it could be abstracted to one of these 10. So your roadmap has to have that. So vision, some objectives. Then you need to have some kind of time frame. Now, it doesn't have to be, you know, week 1, week 2, week 3. Too granular, right? Maybe the common ones that I see are quarterly or to halves of years. The ones I advocate for are very broad, like now, next, later, not doing, completed. So you start to think like almost like columns of like, okay, this is what we made, this is what we're working on right now, this is what's up next, this is what's in the future, and this is stuff we're not doing. We've actually seen that a lot of people actually putting we're not doing this on our roadmap. So we've got vision, we've got business objectives, we've got time spans, and then so like, let's get to the meat here. What are the themes? What are the thematic things? And this is where some people struggle. Some people think themes are a bunch of list of features. No. Themes are not a list of features. What they are usually one of 3 things. They're problems to solve, customer problems that you're trying to solve. They're business outcomes. So sometimes they're actually very related to your business objectives. Or they're like customer needs. Right? So they're usually, a theme can be wrapped in any one of those 3 things. I tend to write more outcome-oriented themes. Everyone has a different take on them. Like, oh, they might write it as a specific customer need. Like, oh, customer needs a way to schedule their appointments. Right? You're not detailing the details of the feature. You're just saying, here, they're struggling with scheduling appointments. We need to figure out how to add that to our products. And so that would be a good example of a thematic area. And then the last thing, that's obviously the meat of your roadmap. The last thing, really important, but we had a lot of debate about whether we include this or not, was a disclaimer. Right? Why? Because your roadmap, as I said earlier, changes. So putting a disclaimer on it helps reduce that expectation that says, hey, this might change. This is a draft. When you think about all those financial statements in Wall Street and publicly traded companies, they have that little thing that says, This is a forward-looking statement. These financial, right? That's really important to your roadmap because it's a forward-looking statement, right? It's saying, here's what's going to happen in the future. And if you don't put that disclaimer on it, somebody might say, well, this is on your roadmap. How come you didn't build it? Well, things changed. Maybe a competitor came in. Maybe it made no sense to do that anymore. Maybe your research team said, hey, you know what? Our customers don't care about that. Take it off the roadmap. Why spend time in engineering resources building it? So those are the 5 components of a roadmap.
So remember, if you are thinking about a roadmap or drawing some roadmaps, remember to incorporate those 5 components. It seems that they're really, really interesting. But it seems to me like, so talking about roadmaps, and in general, if we are talking about the new way of thinking and executing products, there is some way, that I don't see a lot of product teams doing that, like thinking about business and customer at the same time. It seems that you are saying that the roadmap should incorporate those 2 approaches at the same time.
Absolutely.
How can we do that?
Yeah, it's a great question. So one of the things about that outcomes, that business outcomes, I said, the goals, right? You got to have these business goals, right? Increase engagement, increase revenue. What are those business outcomes we're looking for? Your themes are those customer needs. That's what's going to create customer value. So making sure you're tying them together. If they're on the roadmap, they should be tied together somehow. Oftentimes I'll have my themes rolled up under a particular business objective and saying, hey, we have this objective to reduce our churn. And we're going to have these particular themes underneath that we believe if we solve these problems, we're going to reduce our customer churn. That's how we do that. We connect those 2 things together because you can't, yes, you want to be customer facing, but you also need to add value to the business. That's the thing about product. It's a mix of the 2, right? It's the tension of, I've got to deliver value to my customer, but I also have to be delivering value to the business as well.
Wow, nice. And another point I would like to incorporate to our chat today is, so roadmaps seems to be like we are talking about some months, or what are we going to do in the next quarter,
40 years,
40 years. But how can we mix that with the day-to-day backlog? I mean, how can we think at the same time in the middle term and in the next sprint?
Great question.
How can we roadmap? How can we use a roadmap in that way?
And here's the thing: is that next sprint shouldn't be on your roadmap. That's probably the best thing I could say.
Okay.
Your roadmap is not your release plan. Your release plan should talk about what's going on in the next sprint. Your roadmap should indicate we're working on this theme, of which there's these features. Point it over to a release plan and say that's a separate document. So 1, separate those 2 documents. Okay. Very important to do that. And secondly, try to, if you know what the features are, sure, you can put them on there, but make sure you keep them underneath the themes. Because again, if you ship a feature and it doesn't solve the problem, doesn't create that customer value you thought it would, well, you didn't solve the problem. You didn't serve that need. Let's say that appointment example we made. What if customers still aren't making appointments after we ship that feature? What will we do? Right? So we need to think about either reinventing that feature, thinking it differently, fixing it, what? So that's kind of where we do. The other thing is, when you ship a feature, that's not the end, right? The end, that's just the beginning. Shipping a feature is an output. Your roadmap should be driving outcomes, right? So your features will be the output, it's the thing you make, but the output drives an outcome. Okay, so keep it on your roadmap because you got to close that loop. If I ship this feature, how do I know I've solved this problem? What are the metrics? So making sure your business goals and your KPIs are also called out. You may not have to have them called out in the roadmap, but you should know, all right, under this theme, we are measuring time on this page, customer engagement, customer satisfaction, whatever those metrics are around that theme, and know that this feature, okay, we're going to track this. And you probably won't really know until 1, 2, 3, however many weeks or months after you've shipped it, that you've actually achieved that goal. And then you say, all right, yep, we're done with that. Now let's go on to the next.
Okay.
So that's a good way to separate those. Yes.
We are done with it.
Yes, because you've now proven that you've achieved the outcome. Because just because you ship a feature doesn't mean you're done. That's the start.
Wow.
Yeah.
It seems simple, yeah? but then
That's very true.
Yeah.
It does seem really simple.
Yeah.
It's really easy for us to sit here in this beautiful living room with this beautiful bicycle under this cool sign to talk about this. But yeah, it's hard.
It's hard.
It's really hard.
But it's just like to have, I understand, it's like kind of have this list of things I can't miss. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So and try like to make them in our day-to-day as product managers, but of course also in the roadmap. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Nice. So, well, I would like you, so in your book, you define in some part of the book, like in a very simple way also, some like steps. Yeah. So it's, if I want, this is nice. This is okay. We already know the components. We know that the roadmap could be important in order to bring the strategy, to think of the outcomes, and to bring the problems of the user. Yeah. But then it's, okay, but perhaps the audience now want to know, okay, what are like the steps I must follow in order to start introducing this way in thinking in road mapping or thinking in the future of the product. So can you share with us some like simple steps to do that?
I can. A couple of things to think about with this. And so when we run this, we have a workshop that's a one-day-long workshop that we teach at a few conferences around this. And one of the things I say is when you're starting to implement this kind of road mapping approach, don't try to do every single step immediately. So I'm going to tell you some steps of what to do, but you may already do some of those in your organization. You may not. You may not do any of them. You may do all of them. You may do half of them. Only try to implement one at a time. So that's the thing that I learned is when I tried this myself. Classic case of I tried it, I failed. Okay, I learned. Trying to just come in and drop a road mapping process onto a team that's never done it before, be careful about that. You might want to understand exactly how they're road mapping now, even if they're not. Just start with one thing. Do they have a clear product vision? Have they established that? Maybe they have, maybe they haven't. If not, you may want to just spend some time. Let's just work on getting a clear product vision first. Where are we going? Are we going to Barcelona? Are we going to London? Those are two different places to go. One crosses a little ocean or sea. The other one doesn't. Right? There's different journeys on how to get there. So you might have to start there. Okay, great. We've got a vision. Now, what are the other inputs I need? I need to get feedback from my customer support team. I need to get customer interviews, user research from design research. I need to understand what engineering constraints I have. I need to pull in all the inputs. And the thing is, as a product manager, you're the messenger. Like you're constantly going all over the place, right? And in that part of your job is communication and alignment. So you're constantly trying to get alignment by all this stuff. So make sure you have a vision. Put all your inputs together. Put those inputs into some kind of thematic areas, right? Make sure that those thematic areas line up with your company goals, your business objectives I talked about. Okay, once you have all those, prioritize them in some way. Now we could spend 2 hours talking about ways to prioritize. Prioritization is a whole other thing that we could spend a lot of time on. I think we've got a bullet point to maybe talk about it later, but there's a lot of different ways to prioritize, and there's no one right way. The wrong way is like, having your CEO just dictate it. Probably not a good idea. One of the things so this is one of my early failures of product. I was only a few years into product management. None of these approaches had been established yet. I was being asked by sales and Mark, a few different stakeholders in the company, when are we going to have this product? When do we get that product? When do we get this? So I went and I kind of just did a little bit of like looking at what was on our backlog, what were our tasks to do, what were our goals, and I just basically put together basically a version of a release plan. Like, all right, this is going to happen. It's going to take this long to make this long to make that. And basically sent out a version of a Gantt chart. And oh my God, just about everyone in the company was pissed. They were so angry because either the product wasn't coming out when they thought it was, or it was, some were happy, like there's a couple people who were really happy, but most people were really angry. I didn't get alignment. I didn't spend time talking to people about when things actually should. I went off at a corner and I said, here's your roadmap. And so bad idea, right? So when you do this very collaboratively, every single step of the way. Once you've got your prioritization.
This is not consensus, yeah? This
is
hearing everyone, but then the product manager defines where to go, but after seeing what is.
And part of that is having a clear vision and clear goals. It's so much easier to get alignment when you have a clear vision and clear goals. You know where you're going. right? But if you're saying, hey, no, we're going to London, I'm like, but Barcelona, like we got to agree on that first before we decide, oh, we're going to take a bus or take a train or take a plane. So we got to get to that agreement on that, the goals and vision first.
Absolutely. So it seems like the roadmap is a good tool, but we are talking about a way to think in products.
Yeah. And I think that's actually probably the other thing about this is it's not about the roadmap. The roadmap isn't the end. Your roadmap, done, great. All right, I can go home now. Can I have a paycheck? Like, that's not how it works. That's just your tool. That's your communication tool. Because think about it. When you go to your director of marketing, hey, help me. Let's talk about how to update the roadmap. What's going on in your neck of the woods? Like, tell me what you see in the marketplace. And then with this roadmap, we can have a conversation. And we can have it one-on-one. Right? And now we'll walk out of that more aligned. Go to engineering. Hey, and engineers, I mean, you don't want to go to a blank page to an engineer. You want to go to an engineer and be like, hey, this is what we got. Because engineers are great at telling you what they think is wrong. Right? So they'll tell you where all the constraints are. They'll tell you what the thing is. And you go, oh, okay, so we actually won't be able to, this won't be good to put in Q1. Let's put that later down the year because you're going to need to do all these other dependencies and tech debts and other things before we can actually ship something like that. Cool.
Absolutely. And it seems like the roadmap could be a very good excuse to talk frequently to those important players within your company. Yeah. So it seems
even outside of your company.
Yeah.
The woman who wrote the foreword, Jana Bastow, she's the CEO of ProdPad, one of those product management or product road mapping tools I mentioned. She talks about using a product roadmap as a prototype for your product strategy. So we all use products. We make digital prototypes for our products all the time. We test them, we validate them, all that stuff. We should use the same thing, same approach with our roadmaps, right? It's a prototype. Test it out. What's the reaction of the marketing team? What's the reaction of the sales team? Even you probably want to peel back some of the information because I do this. I'll present a version of my roadmap to customers. It's very watered down, but they'll able to get a taste and see like, hey, here's where we're going. How does it react to you? Are we solving the problems that you have? Does this make sense to you? And so that helps me understand, yes, we are, or no, we're not. Like, oh, no, I don't care about that. Like, that's not a problem I have. Oh, interesting. Tell me more. What other problems do you have, right? So it's a great communication tool, right? It's really a tool to talk to a lot of people.
Absolutely. And gathering all the information you need and feedback from your strategy. That is really nice. Okay, so wow. Two more things.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
So first of all, so you have been talking. You mentioned before prioritization. Yeah. Wow. And that is key skill of a product manager. But of course, and you can apply that in different tools. But it's much of the day-to-day of a product manager. What is that applied in a roadmap? And I know there are a lot of like techniques, ways to do that, but can you mention some of the ones that you are using right now?
So a couple of things that I use for prioritization is I use an ROI scorecard. So it starts out with what are my themes? So I've got my themes, and then what are my business objectives? And then I basically rank. If I solve this theme, if I solve this problem, does it help me reach this goal? And then I'll score that. But basically the score goes from -1. So like if I actually solve this problem, it's gonna have a negative impact on that goal. For example, let's say you've got a business goal that's around reducing costs. But one of these themes is around like really expanding a feature set and making it like really lush and luxurious. Well, they're kind of in contrast with each other. So if I solve this thing, I'm gonna have to put a lot of resources here. It's not gonna reduce my costs. If anything, it might increase my costs. Like maybe it actually increase our AWS costs because we ship this feature with, takes lots and lots of data. I can totally see an example of that in my head right now, but yeah, like that could be one thing. So that's why we have the -1. 0 if there's no impact. 1 if there's a little impact, and 2 if there's a high impact. That's it, a really short scale. Because you don't want to be like a 1 to 10 scale, like what's the difference between a 6 and a 7, right? And so I do that myself. I put that matrix together, and then I go and I talk to all my individual stakeholders, but they don't get to see my scores and they don't get to see everyone else's. So they just get to fill in I said, okay, let's walk through this. What do you think these scores are? Like, you score this to me. And then I add up everyone's scores and say, okay, here's the aggregate of everybody's scores. And what I do is I have these one-on-one individual conversations. We're kind of getting to the other topic of alignment, right? So I have these one-on-one conversations that are like understanding how they think that these themes will work to our goals. And then I bring everybody else together again. I say, okay, well, here's what the aggregate is from everybody, you know? And I don't let like, oh, here's what Stacy said. Here's what Dave said. Like, I don't do that. Those conversations are in confidence. But I say, here's the aggregate. What do you think? How does this land? Some people are like,
with all together in a session.
Right. So do it all together as a session, because what we're trying to do is I've already had one-on-one conversations with every stakeholder. And then I bring them all together. I say, okay, great. I know what everybody is thinking because they've already told me. Now I just need to like get final alignment on what this prioritization will be. Because rarely, like, a scorecard is great, but let's face it, you can hack the numbers, right? You can make it, and everyone can do that to some degree. And I've never ever put a scorecard like that together, and it's actually been the exact thing, because there's dependencies about, oh, but you know, we need to do this before we do that, even though this is a higher level of value. So there's a lot of things that happen in that. So not only do you have the impact, but then you also have to do the scoring of like, all right, so if we solve this problem, like, while we don't have all the features detailed, we need to guesstimate like, all right, so if we were to think about solving this, how much engineering effort would it take? So it becomes a classic ROI. But again, like anything, you got to be really mindful about playing into just those numbers, right? Because there are estimates. So again, the more important part is that you're having conversations. You're having conversations, It's not about the spreadsheet, really, right? It's really about the conversations. And then say, okay, now we got this. Where does this line up? Oh, we need to adjust a few of these things. Great. Let's make sure put this one at the top, put this down 2 notches. Cool. Prioritized? Yeah, cool. And now we have prioritization and alignment all in one.
Wow.
Now, sounds easy, right?
Yeah.
It's not.
No.
Because
I understand it's not, because you need a lot of facilitation, understanding, and well, they should be, but at the end, they are all at the same page.
Yeah.
And I understand it helps you a lot.
I set the expectation when I did this final one, is I said, okay, we've got 2 hours in a, executive offsite to go through.
2 hours?
2 hours for this. Just a line note.
Yeah.
I said, it's going to be an hour and 45 minutes of us fighting and arguing and ready to tear each other's heads out and a lot of chaos. I said, it's going to be 15 minutes of clarity. 15 minutes of clarity doesn't come first. It comes at the end. So we got to go through all this stuff to actually get to the end. And that's part of it is you've got to understand that people are going to have different opinions about things. They may have certain pieces of data. Some of that data may be true. Some of it may just be opinion. Like I've got a couple of stakeholders who are they have very specific opinions about something, and they only look at data that backs up their opinion. And if it doesn't back up their opinion, they're just going to be like, well, no, I don't think so. Even if the data says otherwise. So you've got to be very, as you mentioned, skilled at facilitating that. That's also where we're like, okay, that's great. Does this still meet our goals? Are you always going to be asking that question? Does it help us meet our goals? Because that helps you bring that alignment together. Like, we actually getting that place. We still going to Barcelona? You sure about that? You sound like you still want to go to London, right? You kind of keep, as a product manager, you can keep asking that, and that helps you get that alignment in mind.
Okay. And in your case, who are normally in those sessions?
Yeah, it's a great question. So for me, it's my director of customer success. It's my director of marketing, my VP of marketing, my VP of sales, my partnerships director, and oftentimes my CEO and my CTO. Yeah, and oftentimes I try to I try to have more high-level conversations with my CEO. He's dealing with the CEO could be a whole other thing that I'm sure a lot of I wish somebody would write a book about, because it's really hard sometimes, especially in smaller organizations. We're dealing with a very opinionated executive, right? We all have to
manage that.
Yeah, you have to manage that. But what I've learned is that at least this particular one, he just wants to be included in the high-level vision. Like, he's very detail-oriented, but I'm like, okay, you don't need to don't focus on the button. Stop thinking about the button. Like, let's talk about this other thing. So if I keep him at the high-level strategy, I keep him included in the high-level conversations, he's much happier. So it took me a while to figure that out for him, because everyone's a little different. So that's kind of how you work on alignment and prioritization.
Yeah. Nice. So we are going into the end right now. We always siempre acabamos dando oportunidad a la audiencia para que
¿Preguntas? ¿Tenemos preguntas?
Para que nos hagáis preguntas. Así que vamos a dedicar unos 5 minutos
Sí, claro.
para que todas las personas que nos están escuchando te hagan alguna pregunta. Todd.
Muy bien.
Vale, así que ahí os
Pregúntanos algo.
Cualquier cosa que quieres saber sobre
Como
roadmaps.
ask me anything.
Exacto.
Sobre roadmaps.
Roadmaps o cualquier... Hoy roadmaps. A todos le podemos preguntar muchas cosas. Pero hoy roadmaps.
También.
Sí. Pero ahí estás tú aquí, el protagonista.
¿Qué herramientas? ¿Qué herramientas?
¿Herramientas? ¿Tools? ¿Qué tools?
¿Qué recomiendas
Sí.
para
So I get this question a lot, and I don't. There, like anything, there are lots of tools for this. I can tell you what I have used in the past, but there's a lot of tools out there. So I have used Trello, Excel, Google Spreadsheets. I have used PowerPoint. I've even used a Word doc. They all work just fine. I've also used Product Board and ProdPad. And currently, my current company, we use ProdPad just for roadmap. What we use ProdPad for is we have a central place for customer feedback, both on ideas. We have ideas that are generated by customers and generated internally by our employees. Then we have customer feedback, and we can attach customer feedback to those ideas. And we can see like, oh, well, one idea has like 27 different pieces of customer feedback attached to it. Great. If that becomes one of the things on our roadmap, we then know we have 27 customers we can go talk to about that problem to solve. So that's really helpful for us. I have seen, so one of the things we heard, I got asked a lot was like, oh, can you give us templates? Give us templates of what a roadmap should look like. We started doing that, and it was like, no, it's just not, like, it just didn't make sense because I saw great roadmaps that were literally an Excel spreadsheet. They were big Excel spreadsheets, but they were really well thought out. They had themes, they had time frames, they had all the things. So the
important thing is the content, yeah.
And the content of the organization, and there's so many tools that can help you.
Yeah. Great. ¿Alguna pregunta más?
How do you manage all the insights? How do you organize them and include it in the roadmap?
How do we organize
The insights.
insights?
Yeah. How can you gather, organize, and then bring them to the most important relevant one?
Yeah. So like I said, a little bit like what I mentioned, similar to what we had, like we have all these ideas. These are ideas or problems to solve. That's like a repository in this database that we use ProdPad for. And then we have a lot of customer feedback that comes in through Zendesk, and then actually just get piped in. And then what we do is we spend time like reading the feedback and saying, oh, that's like, that goes to that idea, that goes to that idea, that goes to that idea. And these ideas are either like feature ideas or problems, and we make sure we sort them all. Then from there, we'll do a prioritization. Like, how does that line up with our strategic priorities for the year? We have an annual set of goals.
What kind of tools do you use for that?
For the goals?
No, for gathering the information.
We use ProdPad and Zendesk. ProdPad, Zendesk, and Slack.
Okay.
Most of the content relies on ProdPad, and it comes in through either Zendesk or Slack.
And who is doing that in your team? I mean, I understand it's the product manager, but also some other.
Oh yeah, so all of our whole team has access to this. Our customer success and our sales team, probably the ones entering the most feedback and ideas. Whereas on the product side, we're looking and connecting the feedback to the ideas and making sure that the ideas are connected to our business objectives and our strategic roadmap. So we actually don't use the road mapping tools in ProdPad as much. I actually end up creating that stuff in like PowerPoint and spreadsheets. But I use ProdPad for the organization. That's really helps me organize everything, keep everything in one spot. Because when I first got to this company, I said, where's all your customer feedback? They're like, oh, I have this Trello board, I have this PowerPoint, I have this Slack channel, I have this over here, and that over there. And I was like, it's everywhere. Like, oh, yeah, and you know, this person, they have a few ideas in their head. I was like, oh, God. I'm like, can we all get it in one spot, please? So part of it is just, in terms of your question around insights, just get it into one spot where it can be managed somehow. Even if that's just one spot, it's just like, you know, a Google Sheet for Christ's sakes.
Okay, and just the final question.
I think this is important. One example or two applying a roadmap and you have failed How do you have learned about that?
Yeah, so I think I kind of told that story earlier of like, oh, when I sort of sent it out and everyone was really mad at me, I didn't get alignment on that roadmap. Another example was I was working with a very early stage startup, and I was trying to create a one-year roadmap for this startup. Too much, right? I should have created a 3 to 4 month roadmap for them, right? And I first started out and I started to create this, and then there was so much tension and so much contention around like where we were going and why, and I was like, wow, okay. So part of it was, there's 2 things. One, I was trying to create too long of a vision, too long of a roadmap for them. 2, it highlighted another problem, which was that we didn't have a clear vision. The company did not have a clear vision of where it was going. So it didn't matter if I had a 1-year roadmap, it was crap. It could have been anything. They didn't have a clear vision, and they didn't have clear goals either. So those 2 things, if you don't have a good, your roadmap could be awesome, but it doesn't, like, it's going to not make any sense if you don't have a vision and goals.
We know even some product managers in startups that they only work with roadmaps of 6 weeks. Yeah? What do you recommend? I mean, what is the
6 weeks? Something that's really short. You know, that's almost a release plan type. But in a startup, if you are really early stage, you really don't need much to start. Like, you need a solid vision of what are you going to, what's your destination, but then from a roadmap, you know, your roadmap should go out maybe like 2, 3, 4 months, and your release plan, you know, you should only have maybe 1 to 2 sprints of your release plan. Like, you shouldn't have more than that plan. Like, you probably will never have more than 1 sprint. Like, so your release plan is going to be like, what's the next sprint? Because everything's going to be changing so fast in a startup. Trying to plan more than, say, 4 months out is going to be really hard until you get some level of traction. Then you can start to let it get longer and longer, and finally have a bit more settling strategy. But you're a startup, you're like kind of throwing spaghetti at the wall sometimes. Like, did this work? No. And what you can think about is, less of a, we talked about earlier, so those themes being customer needs, problems. Think about your roadmap being an experiment roadmap. What experiments do you want to run over the next 3 to 4 months? What do you want to learn? So think about it in that way. That can actually help you think a little bit more longer term. Oh, if I run this experiment, I'll learn something, and then either I'm going to do this or that. So it might actually be better for a really early stage startup to have an experiment roadmap. Wow. Says that. What about you, Chief Hypothesis Officer? Former Chief Hypothesis Officer.
Yeah, we of course we have a roadmap when I have this role.
Yeah.
And they were all like experiments like that, of course. And so it was a really agile and adaptive roadmap. Yeah, not me, the teams, but yeah. So thank you very much.
Of course.
Thank you for being here again with us in the Hero Camp. Thank you all the audience. Muchísimas gracias por de nuevo estar ahí, seguirnos, por ser tantos y por seguir teniendo hambre para hacer producto, pensar en producto de una forma diferente. Así que nada, simplemente deciros que estéis conectados, que aquí vamos a seguir durante mucho tiempo hablando de producto con personas como Todd, que son una absoluta referencia a nivel internacional y que escriben libros, y esto no es porque sea el de Todd, sino porque es muy sencillo, una forma muy explicada con ejemplos. Nosotros lo utilizamos en la escuela, de pensar, de cómo pensar y cómo ejecutar roadmaps. Así que nada, de verdad, muchísimas gracias. Gracias
a ustedes
por estar con nosotros.
Sí, claro.
Venir desde Boston
y
estar aquí en Madrid una vez más con nosotros.
Bueno.
A todos.